seeing the audience popping in. And just to let the audience know, this is interactive. If you would like to put on your cameras, we encourage you to do so. Again, muting is always helpful, so we don't hear all of the fun background noise that is the evening in most people's homes. So welcome to our audience. We're glad you're here this evening. And of course, we welcome Dr. Edward Kim. Tonight, this is our Center for the Business of Health Career Networks. This is one of our fireside chats. We have 7 verticals, and this is supporting our vertical for provider and healthcare delivery. We are so lucky to have Dr. Kim here tonight. Dr. Kim is the physician-in-chief, Orange County at City of Hope, and he is going to do a much better job introducing himself and letting you know a little bit about his background. Again, we're going to have Dr. Kim introduce himself. We're going to have a couple of moderator questions, but at any time you're open to kind of raise your digital hand or put a question in the chat, and we'll get that directed to Dr. Kim, and he can answer that in the moment, or we'll take a break in a couple of questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kim. So thank you so much, and here you go.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. And thanks to everyone who's taken time out tonight. It is probably a later hour than it is on the West Coast here. I'm in Irvine, California right now. And again, feel free, as Suzanne said, just to raise your hand or put something in the chat and we'll talk about it. Just here to share my experiences and hopefully anything that I've been through or can help you all get to do what you want or where you want to get to. I'll start with a little story on myself and then talk about what I went through. And I don't know if any of us feel like we've hit a destination, right? The destination is just what is the next project and the next adventure. So the minute you start thinking you've landed at the spot is when you start losing your qualities of what got you there. So for myself, I never feel like I've accomplished something yet. It's just the next thing and the next thing. So a little story. So I'm a medical oncologist by training. Went to medical school at Northwestern, undergrad there as well. I eventually ended up in cancer. I will say I had no interest in pursuing that field because everyone died. It was so depressing. But when I did a rotation and met people who were being treated for cancer, and it was just so empowering and energizing to see their perspectives. And whenever you hear someone say the word cancer, it's very different than if you talk about heart disease or any other aspect. And so it just evokes a whole different connotation. I was lucky enough to do my training at MD Anderson, which is in Houston, Texas. It's one of the #1 places in the country to do that. And I was on staff. They asked me to stay on staff, and I stayed there for about 12 years. I was tenured, spent 3 days a week doing research, trying to do drug development, clinical trials, publish. That's what you do in an academic setting. And then I saw patients 2 days a week and really tried to move the field in different ways to think outside the box. And as I reflect on my time at MD Anderson, I could see that I was a little bit of a maverick in some of the things I wanted to try. And that's because we're trying to help people with cancer and the lung cancer where that was my field. These folks were facing a death sentence. So, what are you going to do? Play it conservative and know that we're going to give them the same therapies that didn't work before because that's what everybody does? Or do you try to push the envelope and let patients sort of have a say in how they want to take this? And so that was some history there. I left in 2012 to the shock of many people because things were going very well and had a lot of research funding. And I left to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, which was the Carolinas healthcare system. And they were starting a new cancer institute called the Levine Cancer Institute. That there's no reputation there. You go from #1 to unranked. It was a startup in a non-for-profit community healthcare system. And some of my colleagues, frankly, thought I lost my mind. Maybe I did. I don't know. I married a psychiatrist, so maybe that was self-protection early years. But the opportunity to actually impart a lot of change in a region was what attracted me. It's very rare you get to build something from scratch. And the opportunity to come into a place like Charlotte, which is a small city that's a big city, to have an opportunity to build a cancer program that not only served Charlotte, but surrounding areas, was an opportunity I thought would be kind of fun. Definitely stressful, no guarantees of tenure, no guarantee after 3 or 5 years what we would be doing, but talked it over with my family, we moved. I spent 9 years at the Levine Cancer Institute. We built it up very quickly from 27 docs to over 100. We got US News World ranked 2019, number 50. Only Duke was higher ranked in the state of North Carolina. They were 41. And we ran more clinical trials and had more enrollments than any other institution in the state. So a lot of good things happened there. I got my MBA late during that time period. I'm a 2020 graduate, I believe, Keenan Flagler. So my father was a finance professor. I always felt like I'd get pulled and want to go back to the mothership where my father originated. And so it was a great experience for me to get my MBA from UNC through the at MBA program. I really had fun. I would have done it for another year if they had let me, because the classes, the interactions, the discussions were just great coming from a healthcare background. And no one was in healthcare in my family, so I was first there. And then decided to move to California. Why California? I have no idea. I never aspired to live in California. I don't agree with the taxes. I don't agree necessarily with the politics. I don't like the wildfires. You know, I'm a Midwestern kid. My parents live in Florida. We buried my father in Charlotte, bought a funeral plot for my mom right next to him, but left and went to California because my wife said Orange County was nice. So I trusted her, and it is very nice. But the opportunity was, now you have a cancer center called City of Hope that is it's been around for 108 years. It was originally a TB sanitarium that people in LA, when they were dying of TB, they would go out to the desert because the City of Hope, that's why it was called that, would accept them and treat them very humanistically, embrace their family and help them with the dying process, but also try research and other things to help them. And throughout that history, they now have decided they want to expand and build a second campus. It's very rare that you see an academic institution, they are an NCI designated cancer center, build a second campus. Very unheard of. So that was half my job, was to come here to Irvine, help lead $1 billion investment on a second campus of this cancer center that's nationally ranked. At the same time, the other half of my job is to help create a single entity of City of Hope. They have their big campus in Duarte, and there are 29 other regional sites that exist in California, but they're not very connected, and they don't run clinical trials at them. And so the goal is we want confidence in that if you go to any one of these sites with a family member, you're getting the same care that you would get if you came to the campus. That's hard to achieve in healthcare, especially because of knowledge gaps, et cetera. But that is my goal. It's what I did in Carolina. It's what I'm going to do out here. And bottom line is my family is very happy. The weather is superb. It's second to none in the country, I can say. And it's a challenging job because I was recruited as a change agent. And you'll see that, and it's never easy to be that guy who's the change agent or the gal who's doing that, but that's just what it is. And so that's a little bit on my background. I've always kind of been an underdog status. I'm a 5'8.5" stocky Asian kid who made his high school basketball team in Indiana, from grit and those types of things. My boss, when I left MD Anderson, always told me, you can maximize small projects. So even if there's something you perceive that is, oh, that's not the big project, et cetera, if you can maximize what you have and really compound it several fold, whether it's investment or projects you're in charge of, you get a lot of return on that. And that's just, when I look back, he's right. That's kind of what I've done with things. When I did a medical school project in research, it was supposed to be an 8-week thing, just learn how to do a few things, check the box. ended up being a year research because we kept finding things and we discovered a new protein. So, that's not what the plan was, but you look at the end result. So hobbies, I play a lot of tennis, but not since I've come out here. Do more golf now. I'm not a good golfer, and mostly just take care of my two kids, a 21-year-old who graduated college this past semester and is going to medical school next year, and then my son who's a sophomore. And, he's a lacrosse football player and Broadway actor type person. So multi-talented from that regard. So that's a little bit about myself. Tells you a little bit from a career trajectory. The biggest pivot was that you go into medicine to be a clinical doctor. The next iteration was that I wanted to be an academic clinical doctor, so a lot of research, a lot of interactions during that time with industry, pharmaceutical companies, processes. Really important to learn exactly what those processes are so you can understand the whole picture. And for those folks who are just sort of stuck in the research side, they don't understand the commercialization, the stresses that a company goes through to try and support something and then bring it to market. That's always stuff that I tried to pay attention to quite a bit, and was able to move the needle on several drugs that ended up being FDA approved. Going to Charlotte, a very different aspect. You have to learn operations. Now how do you deliver care and have resources at local places so that you can efficiently deliver care? I was fortunate. I invented this electronic pathway platform that I worked with a company to do, and it allowed us to connect 26 of our sites, do research, to use similar types of guidelines and pathways to deliver care. We could update them in minutes if we needed to, because people who are fighting cancer have to have the knowledge quickly. You can't wait several months for things to be changed. And so this is the urgency that exists. The MBA, I could probably tell I was getting a little bored in Charlotte. That's probably why I had the extra time to do that, find something else to do. And then California came up. So it's been a transition to administration. I still help out and see some patients, but it's a very small part of what I do now. I facilitate patients. I get contacted all the time, and I get them in front of the experts in a timely manner. I don't really write or participate in research because in academia, your credit is from publishing and presenting. When I moved to Charlotte, my role was to facilitate having those opportunities for people around me. So very much, you never know how you're going to lead until you're given the position to lead. And you define what type of leader you are by your actions, not by what you say. I can tell you my actions are very much consistent with a servant leader type of profile. You want to reduce the barriers for people around you so they can succeed. You want to give them opportunity so they succeed. You need to find your successor. I did that in Charlotte. When I left, one of my faculty member, she was devastated. I left because I recruited her from Rutgers, and she came as a breast cancer expert. I said, look, this is your opportunity. I am clearing the path for you to become the chair. Now, she was given the interim role, which is fine, and she was a little upset about that. And I said, well, that's natural, right? I mean, I'm leaving. There's going to be an interim. There's got to be a formal search. So don't get sort of tied up and caught up in this terminology and a perceived slight. Don't create the narrative before the narrative has actually been done. I said, you treat this like it's your job. You set forth an agenda, you start moving forward, and don't worry about the interim label. If you do a good job, they'll take it off. They'll give it to you. If you don't, then you should be happy that they're bringing in someone who has more experience or more talent to help you learn from, etc. And she actually just last week got named the permanent chair. So she called me and she was very happy about that. And I said, this is exactly how it was supposed to go. And it did. So I'm very happy for her. It doesn't matter if she serves this role 1 year, 5 years. She at least now can put on her CV that she was a department chair of a mature department. And that will forever then give her the gravitas when she is looking for her next job down the road to say, look, I'm not accepting anything less than a chair. And she's had it. So this was really good for her. And I was very happy about that. And I think she sees it now less than when I told her I was leaving. But it's always bittersweet when you leave an institution that you help create. I'll just share some of the sort of little tidbits I've picked up over time just for folks. And it doesn't matter if you're in medicine or not. I know this is the business or healthcare, but you always want to ask yourself, the hardest part of anything is how to reinvent yourself. So, here I came to Charlotte. I implemented my 5-year plan in 3 years. I had to figure out, okay, what's the next round of plan and goals? By the time you get 5 or 6 years in, now you have to look at your own stuff that you implemented and you planned and say, is this any good? Or does this really stink? Or can we be better? So you have to face the fact that you might actually be reinventing the own stuff that you put in that you thought was the best thing. That's hard. That's like now, you need to be on a psych couch and talking with folks because you're like, what do you mean? I thought this was the best thing. But times change, dynamics change, market changes, and it's really important to do that self-assessment. And that's one important thing. Second thing is you go out there looking for jobs, critically evaluate yourself. Would you hire you? Flip it around. Ask what makes you something that is attractive. What would you find that's attractive to a candidate? So I always ask that wherever I'm at. I'm like, if I were in my position, would I hire me as an employee, and why? And so, because now I've probably hired hundreds of people and looked at thousands and thousands of CVs and done interviews. I hired 65 people in Charlotte and 25 here so far. Those are just the directs, other than the others. I always find when you go to a new environment, one of the first things that you have to do, this takes somewhere between 3 and 6 months, is figure out what everyone's role is. And that sounds very plain when I say it that way. The example I'll use is, all of you like to read books or look at Broadway shows, or, I like Marvel movies. There's a cast of characters, and it's very much a given that everyone has the same kind of roles that carry through time. So there's always a protagonist, and then there's an antagonist. And the twist in the story is usually you thought someone was good or on your side, and they turned out to be not so. And the person you thought was against you is actually for you. It's that twist in the plot. That's wherever you go. The same thing happens. You have to identify the cast of characters, classify who's in what role, and figure out, who's going to be there to support you and who's really there working against you. And that's the hardest thing to do at a new place, but it's very important. Always keep an open mind, have discussion, be an active listener, right? Listening is sometimes the hardest thing to do. And it is something I give advice on to folks is listen, don't be the first person to talk in a room. Don't be the first person to answer, because let's hear what other people have to say. And those are probably my bottom line, big advice aspects to folks. There's no pre-plan behind this. I'm happy with the way things have turned out so far. I'm 51 years old now. I know there's going to be another job for me in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know what job that's going to be, but I know that I want to get closer to the C-suite, if not in the C-suite, because I like this aspect of having this authority or responsibility or accountability to impart change. And whether that's everything from operations to philosophy to culture, that seems to be what I enjoy. And I have 2 data points on my move so far in my career, and both of them have resulted in going someplace to change and build. So must be what it is.
And that's fantastic because you actually answered part of a question I was going to ask. Well, what gives you confidence to make changes? Do you assess, I think you said, well, I may have been bored, et cetera, but can you tell us a little bit more about even though you said, I don't really know what's going to happen in the next 10 years, is there a point to where you do regular self-assessments, or is it a feeling that comes about and you're like, hey, I'm not that satisfied right now, or I feel like I need a change? What is your process? Because you've made a lot of really cool changes, but a little risky too when, people think about it. Can you tell us a little bit of your process and thinking about those changes?
Yeah, that's a great point, Suzanne. People do come up to me and they're now intrigued because I took a very non-traditional approach to where I am now, and leaving the #1 cancer center, giving up tenure, going to an unknown where this could have totally failed. And I think it's about what you define as fail. And again, assessing the right situation. The one of the viewpoints that people have is if you have someone in the intensive care unit and all of a sudden what we call a code blue is called, meaning the heart stopped or the breathing is, people get panicked and you got to go there and try to help the patient. Well, remember, you're starting with a baseline of the patient is dead. So you're only going to try to improve that situation, even if you try your best. And what is failure? The failure was your baseline. It was already where it was. And so I never was scared of codes because I felt like I could always only add to improving the situation to help somebody. I'm not saying you should find places that are failing to try and go and resurrect them, because sometimes they're failing because of leadership, because of current processes, etc. But I think it's important to go into any situation and assess what is your 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year goal. And then you work toward that. And make sure that you know what your responsibility is and what you have accountability over. And if your boss doesn't give that to you, then you've made the wrong decision, because now you will not succeed if your boss is not supportive. So you have to A, make sure your boss is supportive, and B, know what your goals are. As you get through those goals and check those off, because now you can say, I accomplished these things. Then you go through an assessment. Then you say, what is the next iteration? Or do we have an appetite for that? And for me, it got to a point where I would continually assess after finishing those milestones and seeing, okay, what next? What should we do? Where are we going? And I didn't want to get in a situation where I was just managing day to day. I liked setting new goals. I liked finding a team to go help and achieve those goals. And if it seemed more like it was becoming harder to do that, that's when I would start leaving my mind open to hearing from others. I can tell you, I never actively pursued a job change. I was fortunate enough that people were seeing the work I was doing, and I was getting called about these things. And that's certainly a privileged position to be in. It does give you choices, but the assessment is still the same. What are the near-term, middle-term, and long-term goals? Do they align with the organization? And are they empowering you to really make those goals achievable? And that's how I always looked at it. The fact that I got to live in Charlotte versus Houston was a bonus. The fact that Orange County versus Charlotte, again, a bonus. I thought it was going to be very hard to move from Charlotte because it's pretty nice. But if it was a challenging enough situation and I was recruited to a place in Minneapolis, yes, I would have gone there, because you can make any environment good and it's what you prioritize. If I prioritized weather, then I never would have even given that a second thought and look at that. I maybe would have found the East Coast or Southern state. But I think it's just what you rank as goals, how you're going to be happy, what satisfies you, and making sure your family, if you have a family, also is on board. I didn't sign my contract out here to go to California until my son, who was 15 and in his freshman year in high school, I said, look, it's totally up to you, Alex. We can stay here. We love what's going on. You're in school. His approach, and didn't take any convincing, was, Dad, I am okay being the new kid, and the food's really good in California, so let's go. And that's when I signed.
Terrific. That was a wonderful answer, and definitely gives some food for thought as people think about making changes, especially recently when many people are thinking about different priorities and how to do that. So thank you so much. I'm going to change gears. We do have a message from Judy, and she'd like to ask about competitive staff hiring from other healthcare organizations and even vendors poaching healthcare staffers. She says it's really competitive and most healthcare orgs are understaffed. And Judy, I don't know if you're able to, please unmute and
Judy.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Kim.
Hey,
First
Ed's
of all,
fine. Ed is great.
okay, Ed. I'm Judy Dugan. I actually live in Pittsburgh, so I'm a little envious on the good weather, but I wanted to share that. So I work for VMware. I actually work with the City of Hope staffers, and I actually work in healthcare as far as for payers and providers across the US for VMware. So and it's all the large organizations. So I hear day in and day out. In fact, one healthcare organization told me, they said, even if we filled all the open positions, we'd still be understaffed. And then I'm also seeing where vendors are kind of poaching from the healthcare industry for the expertise that is coming out of there. So my question to you is, how do you wrap your arms around that and really overcome that moving forward for the benefit of your own healthcare institution?
Yeah, Judy, thanks for that. And, we'll hope Pittsburgh has a better season next year, and that can really be listed to all sports. But,
Thank you.
It's going to be a tough transition for you all after Roethlisberger leaving. But,
yes.
So number one, that's why America's awesome, because it's a free market system, and you have different businesses compete, and that's part of business, right? Is supply, demand, and value for time. It's interesting, as my daughter is getting ready to go to medical school next year, kids are less thinking of, oh, I want to be a clinician and work, 90-hour weeks seeing patients and being on call all the time. They think more along the lines of business, entrepreneurship, and frankly, administration. There are some programs even in the country that will graduate doctors, have them get an MBA, and never actually see patients, because the interest is going straight into industry or having your own business or those aspects, which is a sign of the times of how the fields change and evolve. And so I don't think we can do anything to stop that. I think it is going to be that way. And we know that in industry and pharma, they're always looking for talent at every level. I know personally that I could probably get an industry job at any time that I want to, unless something bad comes out in the papers, and I won't get any job. But it's one of these things where it's sort of a default there. And whether that's with a CRO, with a diagnostics company, or with a traditional pharmaceutical company, they're always looking for folks. And the question is, what role are you willing to go into a company where a lot of these industries value experience in the industry, which I have zero, other than what I work with from the other side, and what type of risk they're going to take on you. A lot of these companies are very risk averse. So that's always the push-pull. We will continue to lose people. We lost nurses, study nurses all the time to CROs. And these are clinical research organizations that run clinical trials for different organizations. They would pay $20,000 bonuses to nurses just to get them over to sign. California is a very different situation. There are many unions out here that have a lot of rules and regulations that we have to work through with some of the staffing. I always told people PharmDs are some of the most valuable folks, because they can be, working the overnight shift at Walgreens and making a healthy salary, or being the CEO of a hospital or a pharmaceutical company. And, that degree lends a lot of flexibility to what people can do. So we constantly feel understaffed. We know one of the most expensive things you all are learning is personnel. That is one of the biggest expenses on any balance sheet. So the key is, can you provide adequate job satisfaction to folks, whether that's through businesses, retirement benefits, work benefits, good press gaining, good reputation, or do you pay well? And maybe people know it's not such a great place to be, but they don't mind because they're getting money. And this is the balance that occurs all the time. And we struggle with it. We struggle with trying to hire folks. Right now, there's a national shortage in nurses. If you didn't know, then yes, absolutely. COVID did not help. Many people finally threw in the towel and said, why am I doing this? I'm tired, I'm overworked, I'm exposed to harm and not getting a lot of praise, right? Our frontline healthcare workers are not being celebrated probably as often as they should, just like a lot of the frontline workers that are doing this on a day in and day out basis. So there's a lot of fatigue right now in medicine. And so people are jumping over to industry where they can work remotely, where they get paid well, they get stock options, and their quality of life is so much better. Although they miss that patient component, I think it has transferred a little bit to how can we best help patients. And working for industry, obviously, work for Pfizer or Moderna or any of these companies, you have to think you've had a big impact in the world, right? To get a vaccine out and distributed. So it is challenging, and we don't have solutions for it right now. I'm on the phone every week with our HR department saying, how come we can't pay this person more? Because they have great experience and the job description limits the amount that we can pay them and such. So it is a challenge. And I think healthcare institutions, especially non-for-profits, will lag behind those of industry and other for-profit industries that can be a little more creative about this. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Good luck on your C-level ventures, Morris. I know that they work tirelessly too. So, and I'm starting my MBA in April at UNC. So,
oh, good. Congratulations. You'll have a great experience.
I'm looking forward to it.
I participated in the STAR program as well. William, I'll get to your question in 1 second, but I participated in the STAR program. I told them I don't need to be placed in a healthcare related aspect. I would have been fine being part of a team that was working with a tire company because I just feel like it's learning principles and certain things. But of course, they put me on the United Healthcare, sort of team, and we delivered a great product for them. They actually said that the level of product we delivered for their project was on par with what they would have paid McKinsey or other consulting services to do. So we had a lot of pride out of that. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
William?
Well, as a fellow Californian, I can attest to our fantastic food. I'm actually in Los Angeles. I work for Cedars-Sinai.
Oh, good.
But one of the things you mentioned earlier was when you first joined the Irvine team for City of Hope. And one thing that I'm curious about is how you aligned your goals and your philosophies in terms of like change management to kind of the culture that City of Hope has overall, and then kind of steer that towards like system alignment. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and William, your question is a lot more deeper in many levels because it depends on what your entry point is and what your sphere of influence is. So, I've seen many times, and I was probably one of those as well, where you're the junior person who comes in and you see all these things that don't make sense and you want to change them. Well, you're the junior person, so all the intermediate and senior faculty members are telling you, yeah, just go see your patients, shut up, do what you need to do. And that is going to happen at any type of industry, et cetera, unless you have a progressive leader who wants to give everyone a voice and listen. But it's very tough to come by in that situation. I can share one of my experiences at MD Anderson. I finished my fellowship and I started on faculty. I was kind of the little hotshot, new person because I had published all this stuff and I was in training and I came into the department and I said, how come we don't have a pharmacist? So this department did not have a pharmacist, whereas when I was a fellow and rotating through all these other departments like leukemia and others, they had multiple PharmDs who were very useful. And just that question drew some very harsh comments like, well, why do we need a pharmacist? We know how to do drug prescribing. We can do this. And like, I'm just asking the question. And it turns out we were assigned 2 pharmacy positions by the institution, but we elected not to accept those positions. We weren't even paying for them. And this is the way MD Anderson worked. And so I brought that to the attention because, for 10 years, there was no talk of a pharmacist in the department. And so we finally allowed one to come in. So we recruited and brought one in. I still remember her name was Jody Gary. She actually works for industry. She's worked for industry for the last 15 years. But she came in. She was placed in several of the clinics, mine included, but also some of the senior faculty members. And they butted heads. They said, wow, I'm not going to take advice from this pharmacist. I know how to do this. So literally, she became more frustrated. They didn't want to work with her. She came to me, the junior person in the department, said, can I work more with you? I said, sure, if it's okay with, your boss. So she was in all of my clinics and it was awesome. I loved it. So of course, 2 or 3 years later, as we got our second pharmacist, people started seeing the value of a pharmacist. They looked at my clinic and said, well, how come Ed's the favorite? He's getting favoritism. You're putting the pharmacist in his clinic and all his clinics are covered and ours aren't. These are the same people 2 years prior who did not want the pharmacist in their clinic. So I'm just giving you an example of you might have the right solution and the right idea, but based on what your tenure is, your position is, and where you are perceived to give an opinion in a large organization, that can be challenging. So can I be the same way now that I was 15 years ago? I can be different now because as I've ascended in leadership and where my scope of accountability is, I can say things like that. But previously, I had to work with people. And in fact, the most effective way to try and impart change, because you look younger than me, I'm going to assume, although you're Asian, so you could look young in the rest of your life. I had to throw in a joke like that, is that if you can talk with some folks and get them to articulate your idea, now it becomes their idea. You don't care if they are saying it, because like in my situation was, let's just get pharmacists in the clinic. I don't need to take credit for that idea. But if you can get somebody else to say it, who's a little more senior than you, the net result is you might actually get pharmacists in the clinic quicker and covering more of your patients. And it's better for patient care. But you would be the wrong messenger to bring that forward. So that's what I always love to do in meetings, is I already know what I want to do. I want to hear what other people have to say. And I will shift if I think there's something better. But it's my responsibility and accountability at the end of the day. But if I walk into a room and I just say, this is what we're doing, it'll immediately get shot down and people will disagree and say, how can we do that? If we actually can stimulate discussion, present some pros, present some cons, and have somebody else say the idea, that will usually gain consensus more. Consensus also, another important aspect here, should not be 90-10. I know it's kind of weird. We don't elect presidents in this country with a 90-10 majority, okay? Usually 50.5 to 49.5. And it shouldn't be that close either. I think it should be somewhere between 65-35 and 70-30 when a decision is made. You always want people who will dissent. That's okay. You want to hear that side. And you shouldn't make a decision that's 90-10. The reason why I say that is that then you didn't push the envelope far enough. You could have gone another level higher and get to 70-30 or 65-35, and people still would have gone along and you would have gotten more out of it. So if it's that obvious, it's not really a decision, right? 90-10. So that's the point in which I say that. And it really is about trying to get folks to say it without you saying it. That's almost the game I play in most of my meetings. Does that make sense?
That is great. Now, as a non-clinical administrator, I find that to be the case most of the time. I don't have the pedigree as a physician, so I try to influence in that sense in like councils or going to medical executive committees and having them drive the agendas in that sense. So, absolutely great points. Thank you.
It's how you have to survive. Like I said, we are all smart, experienced, intelligent folks, and especially if you are in a room full of clinicians, then oh my gosh, they all know exactly what's happening and what should go on. It's okay. It's okay if they say it and they want to take claim to the idea because you got what you want. If what you were looking for was to be the person who's in the spotlight, who's taking all the credit for the ideas, now you're not servant leader anymore. It's hard.
Fantastic.
Because we all feel like we want to hold on to our ideas and we should get credit for them. And if you're accountable for moving the needle in a certain direction, your boss should recognize as that needle gets moved forward, you were in charge of it. It doesn't have to be your idea. You just got it to move forward. Pretty deep stuff right there.
It very much is, because again, as you're speaking, you sound like, although you may be in a more senior position now, your vision is more from kind of like a startup place. Because I know medicine, healthcare is very conservative. And as you're saying, well, we need to, people need to contribute. You need to listen. It sounds a lot like design thinking or Scrum and technology or something of that sort. Do you see it changing in the future as we have new players, younger people coming into the fold, that kind of old school thinking about seniority, hierarchy, we'll listen to you in 10 years. Do you feel that's going to change? And what can our younger players do as they come in?
I do think there is a shift right now. I think the pandemic forced a lot of reassessment of ways we traditionally do something, especially in medicine, right? And it's sad that it took a pandemic to cause it. Telehealth now is an acceptable way, not just from the physicians, but also from the patients, right? Patients were like, what do you mean I'm only getting a phone call? What do you mean I'm going to watch someone on video? I need to be in front of my doctor, look at their body language, see their mannerisms, etc. That's fine. But, now the fear of, contracting, a virus, especially in an immunocompromised population, was enough to make change. And I think patients are grateful now when you do telehealth, because it's good. I want to administer chemotherapy at home. There's not a lot magical to give it in an infusion, especially if it's not the first infusion. But if it's a regular maintenance therapy, why can't we do that in their living room where they're comfortable and can have their dog and their remote and stuff there? Well, because the reimbursement laws have set up where it prohibits us from doing it. Even if I send out a van with technicians to be there in the room, we're going to lose money every time we do that, giving a better service. So there are things that are tough that we have to make changes around, but you have to have a goal of what you want to do. And we know people do better out of the hospital than in the hospital. So the less we can do in, the more we can do out, more people can be close to home. I think are all wins. And that's what we're going to try and push as we build this new center in Irvine is, what are we going to do outpatient? How can we force people to stay outpatient using, monitoring technology, et cetera? And Suzanne, to your point, if you're young, demonstrate your ability to finish, right? You will garner respect quicker when you do that. One of the other sort of things I've held on to my whole life, my father came over from Korea. He came over for college and he went to the University of Missouri. Does anybody on the phone or the video know what the state motto of Missouri is? It's the show me state. So there's a lot of talk, a lot of tell. I'm meeting with faculty and I say, oh, have you written that paper yet? They're like, no, I've got a draft. I'm almost, I'll get it to you, Dr. Kim, later this week. I'm like, well, no, if you have a draft, just send that to me right now. I'll start reading the first part of it. And, then when you get the rest of it, then you can say, no. No, you're not going to get that paper for months. Okay. If they were actually working on it, they would send it to you. They don't have a draft. So you don't have to tell me that, right? I would rather you tell me, you know what, I haven't started it yet. I've been really busy. It's okay. Because me asking is not trying to catch you or punish you. Me asking is, how can I help you? Because you getting this paper done and publishing it is good for you and your career. It also elevates the institution. So I care about both of those things. And if I have to be the parent to say, I want a draft by next week, to give you a deadline, to kind of force you to do it, it's like studying, with your kids and stuff, fine, I will do that because I care about how this is going to help you. And unfortunately, it's a very defensive nature where it's like, no, I'll get it done. And I know when I hear that from folks, it's just not going to get done. And then I have that heart to heart with them. Say, look, I got plenty of things to do. I don't need to monitor whether you're writing your papers or finishing this or that, but this is good for you. And you wanted to do this. So let's put some deadlines and work together and see how we can do that. One of my doctors in Carolina, he's a great doctor. Everybody loved him, but he got behind on his medical record documentation, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks behind. So on the one hand, he thought he was being very service oriented to all these doctors who were asking him to see these extra patients. But on the flip side, he didn't understand that they were actually complaining to me because by the time the patient got back to them, they couldn't see his note in the chart and they didn't know what was going on. So they were actually angry with him. And so he was getting mixed messages here. And I had to tell him, I said, look, you got to do this and you got to be able to say no if you're busy. I actually blocked his clinic, locked him in a conference room for 2 weeks, made him finish up all his documentation. My boss wanted to fire him. It was like, we need to fire this guy. I'm like, no, he has got one of the greatest hearts, especially for our cancer patients, who are battling. He always says yes. He's a great doc, but we just need to help get some discipline around him and get some guardrails up. He was there when I left. He's doing great. He had more family life balance because he wasn't just working until 8 o'clock each night. And his wife was happier. His kid was happier. He played high school basketball and stuff. So it's just about this whole 360 of making sure everything fits: home, work, family, and sometimes it's hard because we're all we want to please people. And when we get asked to do something, it's hard to say no. But you don't have to say no. You just have to balance how we organize. So just sharing some examples of things from the past.
Terrific. And so any further questions? We are kind of rolling into our last 10 minutes. This is a great time to ask. All right, William?
I don't know how we don't mind him asking another question, but I feel like this kind of segues though with what your topic was earlier. I think you shared examples of how you've had like a servant leadership style, but also from this recent example, it's more adaptable to the people you're leading. And I'm curious, like, what do you do to continually learn and grow your leadership skills as your role has progressed?
Yeah, a big part of it, and I think I'm very lucky, is that I tend to have a very, and they put you through these tests, and I don't know, there's psychological tests, et cetera, measure what your characteristics are. Myers-Briggs is just part of it, but Hogan's and all these other things. I have very high environmental awareness, EQ. When I used to give lectures to doctors or participants based on my research, I could walk in the room and I could sense whether I needed to be more technical or more casual, whether I needed to stand firmly behind a lectern or whether I could walk out and discuss. And so I think environmental awareness is so important. Reading the room, what is the tone? How are you doing things? I was just on a call the other day, and one of our managers was under a lot of stress, and I know she's manifests it by kind of laughing and joking. That's how she manifests stress. This was a very serious tone with labs and with other professionals, and she was laughing. And I told her boss, I said, you got to just give her some coaching there. Can't be doing that. That was not a good look at the time. It's one time point, but these are things. I always try to look at the bosses I've worked for and respect that they are my boss, but assess and see how they handled something and how I would handle it based on their role. So again, that point of view changing. And sometimes, it's easy to criticize people for doing things, but then put yourself in their position. And maybe you don't have the whole story and think, well, how would you have handled it? I always believe that you can come to the same decision, but do it so different. I'm not an overreactor. People in my old job who used to react. They would then send me emails of things they were going to send off and say, could you please read this and tell me if this is the right thing? And I'd be like, yeah, don't send this email. And then I would help them and reshape it, do this. Because people will tend to remember the one bad incident rather than the 100 good ones. And you will really alienate folks by being an overreactor. So, it is that first motto, breathe, don't overreact. Second, get some other due diligence before you create a narrative in your head, right? Don't get caught up in that narrative. Are you guys still seeing me okay, or is this my screen is kind of pausing?
You're a little bit fuzzy, just not visually, but audio.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna come back here. I don't know if our Wi-Fi is doing funny things right now.
It's the too awesome weather.
Okay, how about now? I still look like I'm pausing.
No, I'm hearing you fine. Is everybody else?
Sounds okay to me.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so continually see from their point of view, because one day, all of you, you'll be in your boss's position or have a position somewhere else. And it's when I mention that accountability and responsibility, we tend to sometimes behave differently when it's on us versus when we can sort of be shielded and be tough because our boss is going to be tough. And so I'm very cognizant of when decisions are made or when I've had input on discussions and how it's delivered and how people react to them, because one day that will be me making those decisions. And I want to try and see if there can be a way to come to a similar decision, but not create a difficult situation. So I think people give you the benefit of the doubt when you don't overreact and beat them up. They will accept a tough decision if they feel you're being empathic to them, so that you understand their points, but that bottom line is a decision has to be made and go forward. And then C is further understand if someone's really against the decision, what is it that is the root cause for why they feel that? So now again, they feel like you've engaged them in the process. And I feel like sometimes those folks are the people you give a project to. Okay, this is what we've identified as a problem. I want you to spearhead a committee to work on this and then come back to me with what a solution could be or a couple possible solutions. Put them in as part of the process. If they refuse to engage in that, then they're just complaining and they don't want to find a better solution. But put them to work, give them some responsibility, empower them in some way, knowing it's a recommendation. I know. Then they won't come back to you because you've given them work to do.
What's one thing you would change in medicine, and what's one thing you would change in business?
Yeah. So Brian, that's a very deep and philosophical question there. So what would I change in medicine? I think the payer landscape has really become the dominant issue right now. I'm not saying we should have a nationalized healthcare system that covers everything, because what makes specialists unique is being specialists. But I think the pendulum has swung too far where, gosh, we can't even get patients approved to have access to a clinical trial. That might be their only hope. So I think clinical trials, don't get me wrong, are written very, very asininely to exclude patients. So that I've actually been in charge, sort of started a movement in 2013 to reduce the eligibility criteria in clinical trials, and actually have been effective. We actually got NCI to reduce the number of clinical eligibility. If you want to look it up online, it's called the ASCO Friends of Cancer Research Eligibility Criteria Project. And we've had now about 12 publications, and I spearheaded this. And again, that started in 2013, and people, if I told people my goal was to get the NCI to reduce the eligibility criteria on their protocol template, people would be like, yeah, good luck, it's noble, but you're crazy, it's never going to happen. It's happened. FDA has given guidance documents to industry to adjust changing. Something as simple as, why is an adult trial start at age 18? What is special between an 18 and a 15-year-old? Nothing. In fact, if you look at it scientifically and physiologically, dare I say that as we talk about medicine, it's age 12. As a 12-year-old, you go to a drugstore, look at a children's Tylenol, it gives you dosing up to what age? 12. Because when you're 12, you will have the same kidney excretion and the same liver metabolism of drugs. So when I see a 15-year-old patient who has metastatic stage 4 sarcoma, and they cannot enroll into a cutting-edge clinical trial that is an adult trial with an immunotherapy or a CAR T, it breaks my heart, because they could have received that. And because we have these artificial age boundaries that mean nothing scientifically, they're excluded. So I hate that. So it's a payer balance with also, we got to put the spotlight on us as investigators, as clinicians. Why do we have these stupid criteria? So that's one side of your equation. The other side in business is that I believe that I wish we could have common goals of sincerity. So you can tell which businesses come in and the only thing they care about is profit. And they will even do anything, and working from my own world, I don't like the fact that McDonald's, charge, if you order a meal, it's a price, but if you just order the large fries, which my wife loves, it's actually sometimes almost as much as the entire meal itself. Okay, that's just price gouging, right? Because everybody loves McDonald's fries, and and I can tell you it's $4 for large fries, and it's $5 for a meal. And I don't want the Coke and the Big Mac, so I hate that. Okay, that's not right. You can take a certain profit percentage, but now you're gouging. The same thing happens in medicine, right? Is that you have pharmaceutical companies that will increase these prices just because they know there's a demand. I actually threatened a pharmaceutical company once that I was consulting for. I said, don't you dare price over this amount, because I will never write for that prescription if you do that. And I was a pretty influential lung cancer person. So they didn't. They came in right at the same price as the previous drug. I respect them for that, but I didn't want to have to threaten them that way. They didn't have to listen to me. And they probably didn't listen to me. They probably did the financials, and I just thought they listened to me. But either way, the net result was they didn't try to gouge the price. I believe that everyone who invests, especially industry, deserves to have profits. They can't stay alive without that. Every institution of health in this country has to have a profit on it, or you're not going to stay in business. But there's a difference between a 20% return and 120% return. So I think those are the two things that probably bother me the most, that are least in my control.
Terrific. And we are nearing the witching hour of 7. So I do want to just say thank you. And Ed, do you have one parting, maybe book, online publication, or something interesting that you're reading, even for your self-fulfillment right now, that you can share with the crowd?
I would say that on tough days, I try to think about what the big picture is. And like earlier this week, I had a tough day, and I made myself laugh in the car, just thinking about, how lucky we are, what is really important, and not losing sight of the big picture. So, I can't watch dramas because I have too much drama in work and with patients. So it's all slapstick comedy or superhero movies. That's what I watch. So those are good fantasy escapes for me. And Suzanne, you can share my email with everyone. So if you have something that you think about later and want to reach out, by all means do so. But I think it's great that you all engaged today. That we're all learning. We all want to continue to learn. We don't have it figured out. Don't think I believe that I have it figured out. We constantly have to evolve and learn. So that's the message.
Super. Well, it sounds like you have a lot figured out so far. So we greatly appreciate you sharing with us. And I just want to thank you, first of all, for taking the time, Ed, tonight and sharing with the crowd. I want to thank Erin Leach. You can see her over there. She gets all of the logistics and everything, invitations, and she invites everyone to have these wonderful opportunities. So please email me if you all would like me to connect you with Dr. Kim. And but I would like to just kind of wrap it up tonight, as we do have other functions. I have to run to one myself this evening. And again, and thank you so much. But next time you can tell us like it's raining or something like icky out there. It would. So again, thank you so much. Thank you, audience. And we'll see you guys hopefully at our next Fireside Chat.
Thank you.
Have a great day,
rest of
everybody.
your day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.